Well, thank you all for joining us tonight. We're really excited to share the draft plan for the Cheers study with everyone. We've been working on this project with partners, stakeholders, and community members for just over a year now. So just as we get started, a quick reminder about Zoom housekeeping. So we've removed the ability for folks to unmute themselves at this time. There will be opportunities at the end of the presentation to participate in polling exercises and a facilitated Q&A where we'll answer a lot of your questions. If you do have questions, please use the chat feature to message the host. We'll be taking down your questions and going through them at the end of the presentation. Oops. All right, so I want to quickly go through the agenda. So we have a lot to cover tonight, which is really excited. We're all really excited about it. And we're going to walk through, a couple of things. So just an introduction of the project for those of you who might be joining us for the first time. We'll also talk about how we arrived at the final concept. We're going to walk through the plan, including the overall systems and experience. And then we're going to talk a little about implementation and phasing. And then we'll pass it on to some of our community partners to talk about the activities that they're working on and some of the next steps for the project. And then at the end, we'll have some polling and Q&A. So just quickly, what is Cheers? So for those of you who may have never been with us in one of these meetings, we wanted to kind of step back and explain what Cheers is. So Cheers stands for the Cleveland Harbor Eastern Embayment Resilience Study, which is quite a mouthful, hence why we have the name Cheers. We've been working on this process for about a year with all the partners that we'll talk about in a minute. And really, it's really focused on how do we improve the resilience of the Eastern Lakefront. So the study area that we're looking at is really bounded by the Burke Lakefront Airport to the west, the Cleveland Lakefront Nature Preserve to the east. It extends north to the Federal Breakwater and south to I-90. We're also looking at what those community connections are back into the neighborhood. So we're really focusing on East 55th, 72nd, and MLK as well. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to Freddie, the director of Cleveland City Planning Commission, Director Collier, to just talk a little bit about the partnership, some of that.
Thank you so much, Mary. As many of you may be aware, partnerships are essential to making sure that we can successfully execute on some of what you're about to see today. And as you all also know, is that no one organization can do implementation or accomplish anything significant alone. So we have a number of different partners who have been at the table working together, not just providing human capital, but also financial capital to make sure that this study is one that is comprehensive and really looks closely at how we can leverage our waterfront. That partnership includes the individuals that you see here on the screen, the City of Cleveland, the Ohio Department of Natural Resources, the Ohio Department of Transportation, the Port of Cleveland, and of course, Cleveland Metro Parks. Next slide, please.
Sorry, there it goes.
And not only do we have a robust set of agency partners with the government entities, the partnership with stakeholders in the community, as well as those that are part of our project team, are really going to be instrumental with helping not to only create and solidify the vision, but also really work together on the coalition building that it's going to take in order to conduct transactions that will make this a reality. I would also be remiss if I didn't indicate how important the committee is with working with neighborhood stakeholders and the community to really get an understanding of what people want to see and how we can better connect the waterfront to our neighborhoods. Each of our partners in each of these organizations all have a North Star of making sure that we have a lakefront that people can access and one that everybody can experience, because we believe that this is God's gift to the community and no one should be void of having access to that opportunity. The City of Cleveland is really focusing on greater access to adjacent neighborhoods and really the equitable distribution of recreational assets along the waterfront. ODNR's focus is around maximizing habitat, restoring aquatic habitat, and Metro Parks, their desire is really to connect our park systems to our lakes to create these go-to destinations and increase our natural areas. ODOT, their focus is really about protecting critical infrastructure and improving safety to better create access to the water. And the port, of course, really wants to beneficially reuse dredge materials to support overall city goals. Each one of these organizations provide a value add that we believe is going to make this initiative successful. Next slide, please. And none of this could happen without the consultant team. A very capable consultant group was selected in WRT, which is the primary consultants, along with KS and Associates, and also Great Ecology. And collectively, we've worked together to come up with what you are going to see tonight. I'm going to turn it back over to Mary to get into the meat of the presentation, and hopefully we have an opportunity to engage further into the meeting.
Great. Thank you so much, Freddie. That was a really great overview of the project. So I want to step back just briefly about how we got to this point. So really focusing on the engagement, the touch points, some of those things that Freddie was talking about throughout the process that got us here. So we've been engaging for the community since spring of last year in April. We've had a number of engagement events throughout that time that I'm going to walk through. We've had really kind of 4 main rounds of engagement with some smaller kind of web-based engagement in between. But I really want to focus on what we got out of those. So kind of starting off in that first round, we were looking at understanding the lakefront. So understanding how community members use those current spaces. What do they like about them? What do they dislike? And what do they want to see in the future? So we had a Zoom meeting very similar to this one to kick off the process. And then we also had a user survey that we put out where we got over 500 responses from community members, folks who live in the city, and even beyond that. And we got a really good understanding of what people want to see so that we could really build upon that vision that was laid out in the 2004 Waterfront District Plan, as well as those other plans. There's a full summary of those engagement events on the website if you're interested in learning more about some of the results. And then in round 2, we kind of wanted to get out on the lakefront because at that point it was summer, so the weather was really nice, and really get people outside to experience the lakefront so they could see and tell us what's working and what's not working. And we could talk through those ideas for the lakefront. So what are those areas that we should really focus attention on as we're thinking about where to invest? So we had a number of workshops as well as a virtual scavenger hunt that people could join us either in a socially distanced walk or independently explore the lakefront on their own and tell us what they think. And then in round 3, which is the most recent engagement events that we did, we were looking at exploring what are those goals and principles and projects that are most important to community members. So we came up with a series of concepts that were focused around engaging with nature, touching water, and playing along the shore. And within those, we asked folks to tell us not necessarily which concept they liked the best, but what were the goals in those concepts that they felt resonated most with them, and what were the projects that they felt would be most impactful. So we had over 300 participants join us between our Zoom meetings and our interactive surveys to give us responses that helped inform the concept that you'll see tonight. And then finally, where we are tonight is refinement. So we're in kind of the last phase of this current process, but I want to clarify for those of you who might be joining us for the first time that this is not the last opportunity that you'll have to engage in planning and design for this area. This Zoom meeting, the survey that we'll be launching, and upcoming workshops will provide you a way to provide specific feedback on this plan, but the partners are going to continue engaging with the community after this portion of the work is finished. We'll touch on that a little bit at the end of the meeting, but just know that you'll have plenty of additional opportunities to help us refine the plan. So Freddie touched on this a little bit before about what all of the different partners kind of bring to the project. So what are those complementary goals that they're bringing into this, and how are we also integrating what the community wants? So we've been thinking about kind of all of these different goals, how they converge, and how we can incorporate them in the final concept throughout the process. So many of you have seen this graphic before if you've joined us, but for those of you who haven't, I want to refresh the process that we took to get here tonight. So during that concept engagement that I mentioned a little bit, we really maximize that experience of water, nature, and community in our 3 themes. And we asked folks to vote on projects and ideas they felt were most important. We took all that information and the votes that people logged, and then we combined that with the engineering needs, the stakeholder goals, and the environmental needs to create a hybrid final concept that we're going to be sharing tonight. So what I want to talk about a little bit is the plan. I'm really excited to walk through this with you guys. It's been really exciting to work with the community and also all the stakeholders to get to this point. But before we dive in, I want to take a step back and talk about what we mean by resiliency. So when I talked about the goal of the project, I mentioned resiliency. And you might be thinking that only means environment. But during this process, we've been looking at that from a three-headed lens of the environment, the economy, and also the community. So we're doing this to develop strategies that will allow the shoreline to adapt while preserving habitat, create a buffer to protect critical infrastructure, but also provide more spaces for the community to enjoy nature and the lake, and hopefully bolster some of those tourism and economic development initiatives from the city. And the goal in all of this is really to improve the resilience of Lake Erie by bringing all of these needs into balance. So what does the community need and what does the environment need? And making sure that those things are balanced. So to do this, our plan really focuses on providing nature-based solutions that connect people and communities to the lake, program spaces that meet the needs of the community, protect natural systems, and enhance the well-being of the lake and those communities, and celebrate the legacy, history, and significance of the lake and the projects that we're proposing. So for those of you who've seen the concept engagement, through this process, we had these 3 themes: touch the water, play at the shore, and connect with nature. And after reviewing the highly rated projects and goals from the 3 themes that are pictured here, we continued to work with our team of engineers, sketching, going through some iterations of how we can best match the community needs to those of the natural environment, storm and wave concerns, as well as our goals to store additional dredge material. So with that, this is the plan that we developed with our partners. So this plan really envisions returning the hardened edge of Cleveland's east side lakefront to a natural shoreline with places for people and nature. The beneficial use of dredge will expand parks and habitat north of I-90, mitigate the impacts of the highway on the existing parkland, protect infrastructure, and create a sheltered cove where visitors can safely access the lake. Swaths of reforestation, new wetland and marsh habitat, and naturalized shoreline encircled by a network of trail systems and tree-lined parkways. Playgrounds, restrooms, picnic lawns, overlooks, and concession areas are distributed throughout the lakefront to enhance the visitor experience. New gateways, expanded event lawns, and increased educational and natural programming activate the edges of the area, while the protected cove, wetlands, reforestation, meadows, and marsh areas provide an immersive natural experience in the heart of the city. So I'm going to walk through the specific components of that plan, but first I want to step back and explore how that community feedback really drove the inspiration of the plan. So you can see on the left-hand side, these were the top-rated goals that came out of the concept engagement. So this plan really does focus on creating new opportunities to touch and engage with water by softening some of those shorelines, creating places where people can walk into the water and feel like they're further out into the shore. It also uses dredge material to create more park space and habitat areas that buffer critical infrastructure, provides a diversity of water-based recreation experiences from kayaking and fishing, and enhances and creates new wetland areas and coves that protect infrastructure. It also creates new greenway connections via East 55th and 72nd that connect those communities to the lakefront. It also incorporates all of those top-rated projects that folks voted on throughout that process. So those top-rated projects you can see on the screen included the Cove, boardwalk trails, cultural trails, habitat trails, lawn spaces for flexible programming, shore spaces where folks could walk down into the water, greenways that would connect back to the neighborhood, and of course, the large island that sits offshore. And then kind of touching back to what Freddie said, it also meets some of these citywide goals. So it helps store up to 3 million cubic yards of dredge material, protects I-90 and improves safety of both motorists, but also people who use the park space, provides equity and recreation for the east side, and supports tourism and economic development goals. It also provides a lot of new natural areas with over 6,000 linear feet of softened shoreline, connected green corridors, new habitat areas. and it increases access for folks from the neighborhood. So it's providing more trail experiences, connecting to all of those existing trail networks and providing safer approaches along those streets. And then from the community perspective, it's providing those places to engage with water, and then also providing places for passive recreation that build on what people already love about the lakefront. We know that people love to go down there and fish and picnic, so we've built in more of those experiences. It also unites all those existing park spaces that people felt were very disconnected and provides a go-to destination for the east side. So I want to just walk through really quickly some of the kind of the systems of the plan. There we go. So the plan systems of community, nature, water, and circulation really adapt to the changing needs of the surrounding communities and the environment. Together, these systems work to bolster the quality of the natural environment, physical and mental well-being, safety, and economic development and tourism. So starting with the community spaces, we wanted to make sure that we were building in more of those spaces that folks love. So there's a variety of community serving spaces that line the lakefront and the Isle. This includes visitor amenities like concessions and restrooms, play areas, water recreation like kayaking and fishing, viewing and scenic areas where community members can take in expansive views of the city, flexible lawn and picnic spaces for passive and active recreation, and immersive natural experiences. There's also a system of trails that serve multiple user types. So you can see in this diagram, the darker trail is the multi-use kind of a hardened pathway for bicyclists, joggers, people who want to walk. And then there's a series of nature trails and boardwalk trails that meander through new wetlands, marshes, and habitat spaces. These trails also all connect back to those existing local and regional trails, like the Lake Erie Water Trail, the Cleveland Lakefront Bikeway, and the Harrison Dillard Bikeway. And then the expansion of the parkland adjacent to I-90 gives us the opportunity to connect Marginal Road, which we're thinking of rebranding as Lakeshore Drive, which has a much nicer kind of park road name, which creates this new parkway that connects the parks across so that you don't have to jump on I-90 to get from 72nd to 55th. So those parking lots and that circulation related to vehicles, we're trying to keep closer to that park road so that those natural spaces along the lakefront feel very natural. We're also proposing, to kind of strengthen that existing RTA route along the lakefront and even look at kind of a micro transit or shuttle loop that would bring folks out onto the Isle either for large events or on the weekends. And then from the water and protection, the creation of this offshore Isle, not only does it provide these great recreational experiences and natural habitat, but it also allows us to soften the interior of the cove. You can see in this diagram the direction of wave forces. So this was a crucial issue related to this project that we wanted to address. We wanted to provide more protection for the shoreline, and the Isle really provides that by buffering those larger waves that you can see kind of in this orange and red color is showing you the intensity of the wave action. And then you can see in the cove and the marinas that wave action is much lower. So it provides an experience for people to learn how to kayak, to learn how to use watercraft in a protected cove. And then our system of habitat. So the protection provided by the Isle allows for expansive new habitat in natural areas, both in water and on the shore. And we'll be elaborating on these types of experiences and the specific elements that will go into that submerged and shoreline habitat. But this gives you an idea of where they're located. And a lot of them are really focused around that cove, as I mentioned before. So finally, I'm going to walk through the experiences or the rooms of the plan. So this is really kind of what visitors can expect as they're walking through the new lakeshore. So starting with the Isle, so visitors can walk or bike across the bridge or paddle out through the cove to wander through vegetated trails, tree-lined lawns, and nature play areas, immersing themselves in the unique natural environment of Lake Erie. Created from dredge material, this barrier island provides protection for the shoreline, allowing for the creation of a protected cove and softening and naturalization of the shoreline edge. And then you have the Cove. So the Cove provides this really lovely protected inlet where community members can learn how to kayak or paddleboard in an area that's more insulated from wave energy. It also provides some of the most expansive opportunities for habitat. And then the shore and the launch. provides a new water-based experience along the eastern lakefront that many community members requested throughout this entire process. So using the land from dredged material, we are able to create a safe place for visitors to wade and walk down into the water. This new amenity gives Eastsiders a place to touch and directly interact with water in a protected and calm cove. The launch, which is the kayak launch over on this side, responds to the community's desire to have more spaces for water sports, and in particular, places where visitors can rent and learn how to operate watercraft like kayaks, paddleboards, and canoes. The launch provides both an accessible slope deck and a naturalized shoreline area to launch watercraft. An adjacent building would provide a centralized location for renting equipment, accessing restrooms, and purchasing concessions. And then we have the habitat loop. So these trails, boardwalk and natural trails, really meander along this loop of the naturalized shoreline that includes marsh areas and wetland habitat. Oops. The trail connects existing park spaces and new habitat areas, providing space for nature lovers, birders, and walkers to enjoy nature. Visitors to the habitat loop will find a series of nature and boardwalk trails that loop through wetland and shrub habitat and connect back to those regional trail systems. And then we have the Gordon Hills. So situated at the terminus of East 72nd Street, the Gordon Hills rise over 35 feet above the existing lakefront, giving visitors stunning views of the shoreline, Lake Erie, and the Cleveland skyline. The Gordon Hills provide a year-round node of activity, changing with each season, offering sledding in the winter, leaf peeping in the fall, meadow wildflowers in the spring, and a prime firework and air show viewing destination in the summer. Then we have the Eastern Fishing Cove. So this really builds off of that node of activity that's already occurring at 55th, where we have all that great fishing activity, and responds to that desire to have more places to fish and places to get further out into the water. So this provides more viewing observation areas to take in those picturesque views, and also just more square footage to actually be able to have more space to fish out on that area. So located adjacent to a flexible lawn and event spaces, fishing amenities, and restrooms, it creates a node of intergenerational activity where families can spend the day fishing, picnicking, and enjoying views of the water. Then we have the 72nd Street Gateway. So one of the things we wanted to do is make sure that we had a really welcoming community gateway that would welcome folks from the community back to their lakefront. So 72nd Street becomes that one of those key gateways to the park spaces, providing an essential link to communities with wayfinding, visitor amenities, and gathering spaces. And then finally, we have the community gateways at 55th and 72nd, or greenways, apologies. And this envisions a series of green neighborhood connections that extend park spaces from the lakefront back into adjacent neighborhoods. These greenways or green fingers include safety improvements for pedestrians and bicyclists, new planting and street trees, and they also connect to those regional trail systems that we mentioned before. So here's a little bit of an understanding of what some of that alignment might look like. We'll talk a little bit later, but there's some additional kind of complementary efforts underway to continue the planning for 55th and 72nd to ensure those safe routes to parks. But essentially what we're proposing here is making sure that we provide the space for bicyclists, pedestrians to really get to the lakefront in a safe manner by incorporating green elements, trail networks, art, and wayfinding. So I'm going to touch briefly on implementation and phasing. So you might be wondering, how are you going to get all this done? So one of the things that we're looking at is how to phase this in a way that is efficient and smart. So you can see here we have phase one called out as the shoreline. So the 43 acres that's called out here is what the additional land built from dredge would be. The total project area of both phase one and phase two is about 150 acres, but the 43 acres is just the new kind of parkland material, which really approximately doubles the park space. And you can see phase two, the aisle, is that 36 acre larger aisle. And we can talk a little bit more about the implementation and the engineering of those components. But what we've thought about is, how do we start this project and how do we make sure that the aisle, which is providing that great shoreline protection, is built so that we can have that softened shoreline along the interior of the cove. So one of the things we're looking at is starting with kind of a proof of concept, or the first phase, phase 1A. So the habitat loop is what we're looking at, kind of potentially going after funding for a potential phase 1 that would really kind of meet all of the goals of our NIFWIF grant, which are protecting infrastructure, providing new habitat, and providing community space. So with that, I'm going to hand it to Kelly, who's going to talk a little bit about coalition building and next steps.
Okay, great. Well, good evening, everybody. We're just thrilled to see the interest in this initiative. But we want to talk about what happens really, between now and the plan being implemented. So we do have some great updates along the lakefront. There's a new comfort station along the Cleveland Lakefront Bikeway in the East 72nd Park area that's going to open May 1st. It has restrooms, a sheltered area in case you get caught out in the rain, some bike racks, drinking fountain. So that's going to be a great amenity added to East 72nd. I think we're all looking forward to spring really coming and staying and getting out in the parks. So, we'll be providing our typical clean and safe parks and really welcoming the entire community with an eye toward maintaining, whatever COVID protocols may be in place. And then later in the summer, we want to wait till the lake warms up just a little. We have been working with partners across the lakefront in Cuyahoga County to get a water trail designated. So there are paddle access points all along the lakeshore, and we'll achieve state designation on that later this summer. So keep an eye out for that kind of ribbon cutting. So next slide, please. But then another really important part of this project moving forward is this ongoing engagement. We're really just starting to build these strong relationships with our adjacent neighbors. We appreciate the time folks have given us and want to keep, hearing how can we make these parks, even as they are, the best for everyone, and then look toward this great vision for the future. So we'll be continuing that engagement. We have our current 5 partners that are looking forward to next stages in the process. And we are really happy to announce that Black environmental leaders are joining us for the next phase. We are pursuing additional funding from National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, and continue, our doors open. So other stakeholders that may want to join the partnership, we're welcoming new participants, and we have at least started conversations with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, just realizing a project of this magnitude, from permitting to potential partnering for implementation, the Corps could really be a great key to getting this done. So with this, I'd like to pass it over. I think if we can go to the next slide, and I'd like to introduce, I think the next slide is Samia. Yes, great. So with Black environmental leaders, Samia Bray, I'd like to invite you to speak to what drew you to participate in Cheers.
Absolutely, Kelly. Thank you so much for that warm introduction. Mary, thank you for that overview. So much hard work over such a long period of time, condensed in just a little place in our time. So thank you. You did an excellent job. So yes, good evening, everyone. My name is Samia Bray. I stand here tonight on the shoulders of those who have come before me in appreciation, in respect, and in honor. As a member of Black Environmental Leaders Association, I have the honor of being one of the co-facilitators. I serve in that role alongside Jacqueline Gillen and David Wilson. Together, the 3 of us provide the public face, and we call ourselves facilitators because the entire organization is built of leaders. Our mission, you can see on there, is that Bell stands as stewards of the natural and built environment through collaboration and partnership to raise awareness and advocate for environmental and economic justice. And so when we were invited to the conversation around the Cheers project, there was only one answer, and that answer was yes. A personal story that I'd like to tell you really quickly is that Lake Erie is one of my most favorite places. And one of my most favorite times to be at Lake Erie is in the wintertime, because in the wintertime, it's frozen. And when it's frozen, at first glance, it looks as though not much is happening. But underneath, there is so much life. There is so much energy. There is so much transformation that is occurring. And this project reminds me of that. There is a lot of hard work happening under the surface, and sometimes it doesn't seem like there's a lot going on, but oh my goodness, so much is going on. And so when we look at all the voices, when we look at all the ideas, when we look at the staying up late at night and the getting up early in the morning, know that this project for me personally and for Black Environmental Leaders Association collectively also stands as a representation of healing. Water brings healing. So as we respect and appreciate our Indigenous brothers and sisters, we also say that we understand their fingerprint and thumbprint is on this space as well. And we are hopeful that they will be able to join in a larger way in this collaboration. In closing, I would just like to end by saying that nature always wins. And so anytime that we can align ourselves with nature and the natural order of things, we are destined to succeed. And so we, as Black Environmental Leaders Association, are pleased at the work that has been done. We're honored at the invitation to join, and we stand boldly in alignment with all that has been presented to you today. And as we move forward, we will continue to stand for equitable use, because this project represents healing, healing that goes as far back as the Great Migration of so many African American families who left the Jim Crow South and came to the North looking for something better, only to find segregation at this very site which we speak of. And so to see the collaboration that is happening here and to know that this project is for all Clevelanders, that even though I-90 is there, it is no longer a dividing line. This project represents a true coming together of all peoples, and we are honored to be a part of this process.
Thank you so much, Samia. That was so eloquent. Just
Yes.
very, very grateful to have you on board and your organization. Thank you.
Great.
Yes.
Good
So
of that.
yeah, so next let's go and I'd like to introduce Charlie Townsend. He and the organization he's affiliated with, Famicos, have been another great partner, and we're going to be continuing to work with them, throughout the summer and into next phases. So Charlie, if you could speak a little bit about Famicos, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, sure. Good evening, everyone. I hope you can hear me. My voice is cracked a little, and it's really difficult following Samia's really wonderful words. So that's great. From a Famicos standpoint, one of the things that we want to take on with this project, not just being completely in support of it, but also exposing it to the neighbors that live in these in the community, particularly St. Clair Superior, Glenville Hub, Hub University Circle, and some of the other areas. We strongly believe that access to nature and access to the lakefront, it just does wonders for the quality of life in urban communities. Numerous studies show that. And we, as representatives of a service area that is majority people of color, we are really jumped at the chance and really love the idea that we can bring something like this to our own community. So we're not only just happy to support this effort, we do echo the thoughts about this being a more equitable project. It does bring equitable space to the communities that live in these neighborhoods. One of the things, which again is predominantly people of color, which is one of the things that we have always tried to focus on. I think that hearing these presentations over and over again, one, Mary, you've gotten even better at nailing this down in a short frame. But one of the things that we always, try to mention is that, hey, make sure that we're doing this from an equitable lens. And we're really great to see that. So some of the things that we plan on taking on with the project over the next couple of months is, one, you will see that we have launched a neighbor nights in St. Clair Superior. And we will certainly be having the discussion about the Cheers study and our support for it with members of the community that come every third Thursday. But more importantly, we are planning a monthly event that will be launching this summer, possibly on Garden Park or another area that exposes the lakefront to the community, to the residents that live here, as well as the Northeast Ohio at large. Everybody is welcome to that. And lastly, I want to talk about our own master plan. We at Famicos, along with some of the partners that are on this very call, have really begun to do a master plan for St. Clair Superior at large. And it's going to be an extensive effort, but we really do like the idea of the things that we've seen in this Cheer study. One of the things that we really, really hope is that we can bake in some of these outcomes and some of these deliverables into our own master plan. I think that some of the conclusions and recommendations that we're going to come to is that it's a great thing. We really, really like the idea of having Black and Brown people be able to experience the lakefront in a different capacity that they've not been able to experience in this part of Cleveland for such a long time. So that's my spiel. I don't think I have anything else, but to just say that we really, really echo the work that is being done by the Metro Parks and our partners. And we're really excited to jump on board. And lastly, please be on the lookout for information about those events that will be happening this summer. We really, really welcome every single person on this call to come out, enjoy some camaraderie, meet the neighbors that live in the neighborhood, and learn more about the Cheer study process. And I think the first one is June 26th, but you all will be getting a bunch of emails about that soon.
Yes, yes. And I will just take this moment to say, probably everyone on this call has gotten an email from me at some point to get the login information. So I can always be your conduit or point of contact. And yeah, we're just excited about the energy that's coming together around this project, and really thrilled to have the support of our partners. I do want to also introduce another initiative that's taking place over the summer with the Safe Routes to Parks work. This is the effort of a number of people, and Jacob Van Sickle from Bike Cleveland is here to tell us a little about it. So, Jacob.
Yeah, thanks, Kelly. Just so those that don't know me, I'm Jacob Van Sickle. I'm Executive Director at Bike Cleveland, and we're the region's bicycle and pedestrian advocacy organization. We were kind of building off of the Cheers study. We recently applied to the Safe Routes Partnership for a technical assistance grant focused around safe routes to parks. And we're focusing around kind of these east side lakefront parks and how residents in the St. Clair Superior neighborhood can have safe, equitable access to the parks while not owning a car, being able to bike or walk there safely. So over the summer, we're going to be hosting a number of engagement activities. On the screen here are two upcoming ones for May. We're going to do a bicycle safety rodeo with Wilson School on May 12th, and then we're going to do a community bike ride on May 15th. And the focus of those are really to engage people out on bikes, but also get a better understanding of, one, do they know the parks exist? How are they getting there? What are the barriers and obstacles to getting to the lakefront parks? And how can we as a community work to address those barriers to make sure people have equitable access to the parks? So this work is really being done in partnership, not just by Cleveland, but with St. Clair Superior Development Corporation, the Cleveland Metro Parks, and the Cleveland-Kent State Urban Design Collaborative. So if you want to know more or get involved or take our survey about how you access the parks, you can visit bikecleveland.org/SRTP.
Excellent. Thank you, Jacob.
Yeah, thank you. Those were great presentations by all of our community partners. I also want to give an opportunity before we go into Q&A, and I think we have some questions that folks have already put in the chat, but to give an opportunity to any of the other partners or folks that have been working on this project, if there's anything that you guys are working on that's connected to this that you want to share before we go into that Q&A. It's okay if that's a no. Have plenty of opportunities. Okay. All right. So we're going to go into our Q&A, and I'm assuming there's probably a fair amount of questions and things that we can clarify for you. So go ahead and feel free to kind of log those questions in the chat. A couple of polling questions we're going to just run through really quickly while you're kind of collecting those questions. And then William is going to be reading those questions out from the chat. And then Kelly and I will kind of direct kind of MC who should be tackling those different questions. So I'm going to launch the polling really quickly. So these are just kind of gauging the response from folks in the meeting. So on a scale from 1 to 10, how well do you think the plan responds to the needs of the community? So gathering spaces, visitor amenities, access, being able to touch the water. So what are some of those issues? And do you think the plan is addressing it? So 1 is not very well, and 10 is very well.
You saw the edited wall.
Great. So as folks are answering that, I actually have a question for our last speaker, which we think we can maybe just answer really quickly. So Clifton wants to know for Jacob, what is the delay on the Superior Avenue bikeway, which would connect the Cheers project via East 55th? Oh, he just answered me directly. So I think it would be good to kind of share with the group in case someone else had a similar question.
Yeah, I answered Clifton directly. Freddie might have a better answer, but the Superior Midway, which will run from Public Square on Superior out to East 55th, does have some funding secured from NOACA, about, I believe, $8 million. And I believe, Freddie, correct me if I'm wrong, but the city is doing some preliminary engineering around it and currently seeking additional funding for implementation.
Yes, that's correct in general, but let me drill down a little bit. So the city applied for a grant to NOACA that secured $8 million for a contribution to the advancement of the Superior Midway. Since then, the city has done some detailed engineering work because that's really how you get into the meat and potatoes of really what it's going to cost. There are some funding gaps. However, we are looking at some strategic infrastructure investment opportunities that are going to present themselves to the city very soon, which we think we may be able to close the gap on some of the strategic initiatives, particularly those that have some funding needs in order to make them a reality. And as you all know, bicycle access and micromobility and utilizing our roadways to be able to serve multiple users has been a priority. And it's been a priority for some time. And the Superior Midway is probably one of the most catalytic initiatives that we believe can really start to really change the culture to get people understanding the importance of multimodal activity. And obviously, the Superior Midway would be connecting our downtown all the way out to 55th Street. And again, these are very critical connections that have to be made from the neighborhoods, from the businesses to assets like the waterfront. So it's really about creating a system of bike and multimodal amenities citywide. And that's ultimately what the objective is.
Great. Perfect. So I just realized all 3 polling questions will come up all at once. So I should probably give you all 3 questions so you can submit your answer. So the second question, if you haven't already answered it, is asking you to kind of rank whether you feel the plan is addressing the needs of the environment. So ecotypes, improved water quality, protection from storm and wave action. And then the last question is just kind of where do you think we should start in terms of those early action projects? So we've primed with some opportunities. We'll also have a survey available online for you to give us open-ended answers about what you think those early action projects should be. Unfortunately, Zoom does not have that capability for you to type in other. So we'll have that opportunity for folks to provide additional ideas for what those should be. So feel free to go ahead and vote. It looks like we have about 66% of people voting. So while we're waiting for folks to vote, William, maybe we can go ahead and get started on some of the questions.
Sure. So I'm trying to group them together where applicable. So some people might be partnered up on questions. So the first question that I got was from Paris, and they're interested in knowing, are all of these spaces adaptable for individuals with varying handicaps, such as the playground area? Will there be swings for wheelchair users? Will the boardwalk be available for people with non-motorized wheelchairs?
That's a great question. I don't know if Kelly, you want to answer that from Metro Park side. I know from a designer side what I would say, but I'll let you.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, we've been engaged in efforts to improve accessibility throughout the park district, and yes, access by all is a kind of a foundational goal of ours. There may be some instances that it's a similar experience that we'll be providing, but accessibility for kind of all abilities is definitely a goal.
And then the next one I got similar questions about access, one from Peter and one from Nora. So talking about watercraft in the Cove, can we explain what kind of watercraft would be allowed in the Cove? As a kayaker, Peter's wondering, will it be restricted to just paddlecraft and exclude larger boats and power boats as well as sailboats? Yeah, let's actually start with that one and then I'll move on after that.
Yeah, really, the Cove is one of the elements that I'm really most excited about because it provides that sheltered environment that we don't have in a lot of places along the east side lakefront. And the intent at this time is primarily, kayaks, stand-up paddle boards, perhaps small sailboats. There may be some limited access to power boats, perhaps along an edge. We really haven't drilled into that level of detail yet, but the Cove is really just supposed to be kind of basically a quiet, calm water area.
So then we have a few more questions about dredge materials from Nora and James. Are there any hazardous materials in the dredge? And if so, how will that be mitigated to minimize exposure? James had a similar question about how will they be filtered before being used as fill?
Want me to take that one? So we really learned a lot about sediment, and Cleveland Lakefront Nature Preserve is a great pilot project for this because we did extensive testing before we opened that site to the public. And we know what we're pulling out of the river now is even so much cleaner than when that site was filled with dredge sediment. So the material there matches your background soils pretty well. And, occasionally there are sites along the river, and we've been able to identify them where it is not suitable and would not be placed in this area, but instead buried at the current confined disposal facilities.
Great.
Mary,
William, yeah, I think William and I are both getting questions, so we'll kind of tag team back and forth to make sure we're not missing any folks. And if we're not able to get to all the questions in the session, we will type these up and give written answers on the website after the meeting if we're not able to get through everything. So what will the effect be on water circulation in the Cove when the lake levels drop? So I think this is a Mark question.
Yeah, we're planning for water circulation in the Cove. That's one of the reasons why we've got it kind of open to the west, where we've got prevailing winds in this area coming in from the west, and also have left an opening to the east there. Some of the earlier concepts looked at maybe making that sort of a connected to shore peninsula, and as we started looking at water circulation, it seemed to make a lot more sense to have that as almost a free island out in the near shore there, so that we could have circulation straight through the Cove. one of the interesting things that we actually get in raises and lowering times of water levels is kind of a pumping action in this, where if you have some protected water like this, it can actually lag behind the lake water level as the lake water level rises and falls due to changes in wind directions or seiches. And that's also that pumping action helps flush out enclosed water areas like this that are connected to the lake to try to solve some of those water quality issues. So that's something we have been looking at, and we'll continue to look as we get into the detailed design of each one of these elements to make sure that you can kind of plan for changes in water levels and for water quality in the basin.
Thanks, Mark. And I have a second question that I think would also be for you. Will the harbor be equipped as a harbor of refuge for boaters seeking shelter from a storm? Will there be navigation buoys? This is from Jay Shorey.
So there's a potential that it could be. There's a lot of places in Cleveland Harbor right now that you would pull into it as a harbor of refuge that you wouldn't necessarily need to make use of this cove. In a storm situation, either the entrance to East 55th Street Marina or Marina Gordon Park, the Intercity Yacht Club would be still available there to be a harbor of refuge. In an emergency situation, I'm sure someone could pull into the cove and find safety there. But there's quite a few areas, existing marinas in the east end of the harbor here that you could make use of.
Great. Thanks, Mark. William, do you want to go to some of yours?
Yeah, I think following up on that, I actually just got a question talking more about wave action in the Cove. So the question is, where did it go? I just lost it. There we go. From Michael, while the island shelters the cove and buffers waves from the shoreway, it appears to now concentrate waves around the access to East 72nd, where a lot of boat traffic currently navigates. So if you can talk a little bit more about the wave action near East 72nd and boat traffic implications.
Yeah, so at East 72nd, and there is a lot of boat traffic there with the Intercity Yacht Club and the Gordon Park boat ramp. One of the things that we're looking at doing is designing the structures, not necessarily that we'll be funneling energy in there, but that we'll have sufficient structures with sufficient slopes to dissipate the wave energy. So we get much less wave reflection off the structures than what is there in Cleveland Harbor now. Just spending any time in Cleveland Harbor, you'd be familiar with that current intersection at the east end of East 55th Street Marina, where there's sheet pile bulkhead along East 55th and sheet pile bulkhead. It's all the steel walls on the south side of the basin there, and you can just watch the energy build in that corner as waves reflect off of all those hard vertical surfaces. In areas where we can do a slope surface that would be more of a breakwater or revetment, we'll be looking to try to dissipate that wave energy rather than reflecting it into the near shore there to try to really reduce the amount of kind of buildup of wave energy that we have in the corners and some of the existing areas in the harbor now.
Great. William, do you have another one, or do you want me to?
Yeah, so I have one that is asking about the shore conditions. So they noticed that there are many pictures showing the use of riprap, such as large stones, to recreate and protect the shoreline. Being that this project is creating green space in a natural habitat, would it make more sense to utilize greener and natural solutions?
So I can take a first stab at that, and then Mark can follow up with the engineering portion. So yes, we are looking at using more natural solutions, but we also have to understand the wave forces and the action out here is really intense. So to the extent that we can use those in the protected areas where we have some buffer from that wave action from more hardened structures, we are using those natural methods of shoreline protection. So Mark, I don't know if you want to kind of add anything to that.
Yeah, we know the wave forces out here are immense, and just looking at the size stone that's used on the Cleveland Lakefront Nature Preserve to stabilize that structure, we're looking at 12 to 24 ton stone. So it's intended to dissipate quite a bit of wave energy, and that's really what's needed when you get to that size of waves and that type of water depth. And so the north side of the aisle that's going to be in similar water depth with similar exposure is going to need to have large rocks for protection. There's really no other way around it. But the benefit then is that if we dissipate all that wave energy at the very north end of the project along that lake facing shore, that gives us the opportunity to have a lot softer edges and to incorporate some nature-based shoreline stabilization techniques around the rest of the project, which is something that we're really excited about the opportunity for in this project.
Thanks, Mark.
Yeah.
Freddie, did you have something to say?
Yeah,
Go
Mark,
for it.
it was interesting you said that because I was watching a ABC special earlier today talking about erosion and how as a nation we spend about 500 million a year in dealing with erosion issues. So we obviously don't want to create a situation where we build something of this magnitude and allow it all to erode away. So the necessity of having the right infrastructure to protect it is essential. And I know there's obviously a desire to make sure that it's more soft and aesthetically pleasing and habitat enhancing. But again, the necessity to protect it should be the priority.
Well said. Well said. So I'll read a couple of my questions. So I have one that is from Christiana, asking if we can clarify the parking situation. So I'm going to try to interpret what you're asking in that question. But we are not proposing removing any existing parking. We are expanding the parking areas. And in the systems diagram, as I walked through that, one of the things that we're trying to do is kind of keep that parking to the edges of the park space off of Lakeshore Drive so that we can keep some of those recreation and natural areas away from that main circulation, but also provide accessible routes, drop-off areas where people can get to certain program elements. So we'll be providing additional information on that in the master plan about the actual parking counts, so you can see the difference, but we are not removing any parking. Kelly, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
You did a great job. I think the other thing that we're really hoping to focus on too, you know, multimodal links to the parks so that we don't need to really add a lot of parking. But we realize, you know, this is a regional attraction. You know, we do have the boat ramp access at North Gordon Park. So, you know, it's like a lot of things. We're trying to find kind of that happy medium.
Yeah, and that kind of piggybacks on another comment from Kamala Lewis, who said, you know, she loves the plan, but she expects it's going to be a great draw and didn't see any added parking. So we are adding parking. And I think, you know, as we move into that detailed design, there would be additional studies to determine between traffic studies and kind of circulation studies to make sure that we have the right amount of parking and also the right amount of circulation for the crowds that this area might draw.
Yeah, and I'll just jump in and add also, it's kind of striking to me when we look at this plan, you know, there's a lot of capacity also at South Gordon Park. And as we move to make, you know, this entire network of parks and open space with the Cleveland Lakefront Nature Preserve and the proposed additional space with Cheers, you know, really connect those spaces, we can take advantage of some of that other infrastructure as well.
I've got some good questions to follow up on that topic too. So we have a few questions asking about the implications of I-90 and if there's any consideration of the effects on this plan if it were to be reconfigured, as well as what considerations have been made to connecting the south side of the shoreway to the lakefront with pedestrian access and views.
I can take that. So can you guys hear me? So there's a lot of detailed planning that's going to be taking place in this geography. NOACA has a lakefront access study that they're going to be engaging in. There was some discussion about FAMICO's neighborhood master planning. Also with these other efforts around our TOCI initiative that we're going to undertake to really start to look at how you can literally connect these areas to actual development sites. I think one of the things that people forget is that when we have an enhanced waterfront, and that's what makes Cheers such a value add here, is that it increases the marketability of this whole community because people want to live and experience these type of assets and be able to do them, you know, conveniently and in a low stress way. So as we look at this area, the infrastructure piece is going to be critical to making those connections. So even though you may have heard 55th Street, 72nd, MLK being touched on, there's a lot of transactional activity that has to happen. So we like to think of ourselves as being in a mode of creating a development strategy, not just planning. I mean, there's been a lot of planning done. So how do you get to executing some transactions here? And I think that's really a big priority of the administration and of the city, to be able to see these types of enhancement yield reinvestment and reestablishing value in the actual neighborhoods. Not to mention, when you think about the existing residents who live here and whether or not they have that access, I can tell you, if you look at the Collinwood neighborhood, St. Clair Superior, you have people who live next to this amenity and have not experienced it at all, and that is tragic. And that has been really everyone's, why, with respect to how we need to leverage our waterfront as well as our riverfront. And the infrastructure hurdle is really about correcting the wrongs from the past. We have a waterfront that was developed for just strictly economic purposes. It wasn't about access. It wasn't about sustainability. And that's what makes this such a heavy lift, is really correcting, in essence, those inequities that took place many, many years ago. And it's not an easy lift to undo all of that. So part of these initiatives that you're going to see coming forward is really going to be helping to advance the ball to getting to something that's executable and getting to the point of implementation.
Great. Thank you, Freddie. I think the other part of that question had to do with I-90 in particular, and whether, if there was if I-90 were to move at some point in the future, would this impact this project area? And Kelly, I'm not sure if you want to touch on that, or if Dave is here to touch on that.
Dave is here and Sean is here, so I think I'm gonna
You'll
throw
let
that
Sean
to
do
the
it.
engineers.
Go for it.
Well, this is Dave Lostofka with ODOT. ODOT to date hasn't studied, moving I-90. I don't think anything in this plan, would preclude that happening. But the reality is, the moving I-90 would be a very heavy lift for the region. It would be very costly and difficult to do. But it's not. It wouldn't be. It could be done if this project was enacted.
Great.
I will jump in and one of the points that I feel so strongly about with the Cheers concept that wouldn't be addressed by simply moving I-90 is just the creation of the habitat and the ability to touch the water and the softened shoreline. And I just feel like Cheers has so many other kind of value added points. I think that discussion about I-90, has been going on for probably since it was built and can keep going on. But to focus on what we have the ability to transform now is really powerful, to me at least.
Well said. I have a few questions, William, some about specific aspects of the plan and some about implementation that I want to get to, because I think they're really important questions. So the first one is, I may have missed this, but is there a plan for the bridge that crosses I-90 from Gordon Park to the Yacht Club bike walking path? So I assume that you're talking about the current pedestrian bridge that connects North and South Gordon Park. So Freddie, I will let you jump in on this as well, because I'm sure you have something to say about South Gordon Park. But just in terms of the plan, what we're looking at here is a future enhancement of the pedestrian bridge that simplifies the circulation to it and looks at potentially widening it and creating a better pedestrian experience on the deck itself. But there are some other efforts that are going on in the future in South Gordon Park that I'm going to stop talking and let Freddie talk about for a second.
Yeah, I think you said it. I think the pedestrian enhancements to Gordon Park, to this area, are needed and are critical. And that is something that is very much on the cards. The city owns Gordon Park. Gordon Park, as many of you know, is underutilized in many ways. And the view sheds up there are amazing. But there's also some community use for Gordon Park. And one of the things that we're looking at right now is the appropriate enhancements for Gordon Park and what could those potentially be. And that's, again, going to be a part of a lot of the work that we're going to be doing to really look at, how do we connect all the dots here? So those connections to the neighborhood, for example, I don't know if many of you know, but there's an actual tunnel that exists that goes underneath the actual tracks. And, that's a huge opportunity. You have areas like East 82nd Street, and if you haven't seen that, the prospect of East 82nd Street and looking at how that overlooks Rockefeller Park, there's all of these hidden gems and amenities that needs to be leveraged on a small scale. You look at what happened over on the West Shoreway, there had to be a lot of creativity with respect to making those connections. But I think part of the work is going to be is that making sure each of the partners understand sort of what that big vision and that North Star is and be able to execute on their pieces of the puzzle. And that's why you may always hear, us say from the city level that what is the value add? Everything that we do, everyone has to kind of fit in like Lego blocks in order to make it happen. Any replication of anything is just a waste of time. Part of, our goal as part of this effort is really to understand sort of what are those items that will require that table setting. Looking at, a partner like Metro Parks, knowing what they do well, looking at OD&R, what they do well. The Development Corporation, what do they do well? And everyone, trying to coalesce in that type of a fashion. And, it's our hope that, even after this study, and I think Kelly may alluded to a little bit, the coalition building that it takes for implementation, keeping people on track after a plan is on paper. And that goes also along with the engagement component. Engagement is nonstop. It's not about engaging and then the plan's done and no one ever talks again, because again, that's not valuable either. I think the coalition building and creating the networks of relationship and that open dialogue and building, continuing to build trust, I think is important. And along with that comes a lot of transparency. And I think, if we can, switch to that level of value proposition, I think you'll be able to see a lot happen in this geography, over the next decade.
Great. I think that transitions really well into my questions about phasing. So there's a couple of questions, and I'm going to kind of try to answer them together. So there's one that's asking, when would the first phase of this project be ready for public use? And then what is the best case scenario for start and completion? So Mark, we've talked about this, but I'm going to let you handle it because there's a couple of different kind of factors that weave into that.
Sure. There's some possibilities for phasing and taking a look at what is what's feasible and what's achievable in what order do these projects, and then there's ways to look at it to say what makes the project the simplest to construct, or what the biggest bang for the buck type of thing. So we're starting off focused on the habitat loop area. Just north of the former power plant property. And the reason to start there is a couple of reasons. One is it's a smaller piece that we can bite off that is implementable in a relatively short amount of time. We're working at some grant opportunities to at least fund the design and engineering components of that already. And the second reason for that is that it's sort of like a mini Cheers project, in that it sort of accomplishes a lot of the stakeholders' goals in a smaller package. So it gets us the habitat we're looking for. It gets new access and park amenities. It protects the I-90 infrastructure. It's sort of the ideal location for that. A lot of the partners' goals, it uses up dredge material. So a lot of the partners' goals all get put into a small kind of proof of concept pilot project that's easily done. Now, the downside of that is that in order to do that first, and you can kind of see the harder edge on that, without the island there, it's going to require some large shore protection on the north face of that project. Now, ideally, we could build the island first and then have the rest of this area protected and not have to use as much stone in the inside structures. But the island is a large bite to take for your first bite of the sandwich. So we're hoping for a proof of concept and start with something that is implementable and move forward with that. And then with the hopes that when some momentum is built and some more project partners are brought on, that some of the larger projects then can start falling into place.
Yeah, and Mark, I think you kind of answered a couple of the other questions which were coming in is a lot of people very rightly said, does phase 1 risk being eroded without phase 2 being completed? So we have had discussions about contingencies, for the Isle. There's a possibility that we could build the perimeter breakwater on the Isle, and that would protect the shore long enough to then complete the Isle. So when we say phase 1 and phase 2, we're not necessarily it's not necessarily perfectly aligned to the timing because a lot of that is contingent on funding availability and partnerships. So that is an active conversation that we're continuing to have. Great. William, I don't know if you have any other questions. I have a few more, but I'll kick it over to you.
Yeah, I've got a few more. Let's see. So related to what you were just talking about, we've got some questions about the access during the project's development. How well can access be maintained while the projects are in process, especially to not discourage current usage?
Do you want to handle that, Kelly?
I'll jump in and kind of share the thoughts. One thing that the partners have talked about is we really don't want to take any current areas out of commission until we can offer new amenities. And so I think a couple of us have referred to this as kind of a Rubik's Cube because, yeah, there are a lot of moving parts and thinking about timelines and, minimizing impact to park goers. But just know that is a priority. I don't think we have a plan exactly of, we're still kind of scrambling to look for different funding sources. But that is a key concern that we want to leave the fishing areas open. We want people to be able to come and have picnics without being impacted by the construction process to the extent possible. So we're still working on it. And again, we're just going to try to be as transparent as we can as we go through this process, because we know, this has to be a project that gets a lot of community support to be able to make it happen. So, we want to have that dialogue and that relationship to guide us. So thank you.
And then I've got a little group of questions about elements of the plan and the design. So I'll just throw them all out there at once. One is, can we speak a little bit more to the potential connections to Cleveland Lakefront Nature Preserve and the new design elements there? Speaking of equipment rental, will this include like bikes and scooters for land equipment rentals? And will there be shaded areas near the water?
Ooh, can I answer that in a backwards fashion?
Yeah.
So will there be shaded areas near the water? Yes. Will there be places to rent scooters and bikes? Is that what you said?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's one of the things that we kind of want to talk about when we're looking at circulation. We want to, try to at most extent possible to reduce the amount of automobile traffic, because one of the things we heard is that, people want to have that experience of being immersed in nature and not, have a bunch of car infrastructure around them. So I think we will be looking at opportunities, not just for kayak rental and the water, but also what are those kind of micro mobility solutions to help get people those last mile, especially understanding kind of the distance between the shoreline and the Isle. So that's one of the reasons we're looking at, potential shuttle as well. So yes, we will be looking at some of those techniques. And then the nature preserve connection, I think I'll give that to Linda. We've had some discussion about that, but Linda, I don't know if you want to kind of talk from the port's perspective on that.
Yeah, I'll just say, we've developed some very high level concepts, but really haven't got to a level of detail on what changes there would be with trails, but I think it would be, mostly a trail connection.
Yeah, I think just to kind of piggyback on those comments, one of the things that we were looking at from a conceptual level is whether we could create another kind of trail connection near, I don't know if you guys can see my cursor, but near North Gordon Park to kind of fit into some of those other trailheads along the area, but we're still working that through. All right, William, any other questions from your end?
Oh yeah, I've got plenty to keep us. Well, I'll throw one more out there, and then we can jump back to you, Mary. So Felix was wondering, on the topic of expanding and creating habitats, what are the specific local species that the Cheers project considered in its design?
So I think there's two people that could answer this question on the call. We have Kate from Great Ecology, who's on our ecology team, and I think Jen from Metro Parks is also in terms of land management. We've had some conversations about making sure that whatever we propose is aligned with long-term kind of management as well. So Jen, I don't know if you want to start first, and then Kate.
Kate can go ahead.
Oh, Kate, go for it. Oop, Kate, are you able to unmute yourself? Oh, it looks like. Oh, I think we may have lost Kate. Okay. I can follow up on that.
She's here.
Oh, she is?
Yeah, and she's unmuted, but somehow.
Oh, we just can't hear her.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, I'll jump
Oh,
in
no.
and see if her volume can get fixed. So my name is Jen Greiser. I'm the Director of Natural Resources for Cleveland Metro Parks, and my team did some cursory reviews of Great Ecology's studies of the area. We submitted quite a lot of data for the team to review, all of that awesome bird data associated with Cleveland Lakefront Nature Preserve. We also provided a variety of fish related data from Lake Erie through our aquatic biologist, Mike Durkulak, and also aquatic plant data from our non-native invasive species coordinator. So we really tried to upload a lot of that localized data into what Great Ecology was looking at to inform their recommendations going forward.
Jen, thank you, and thanks for the teamwork with the project. And I'll just add too that we are aware and have had at least an initial discussion about potential concerns about the project area due to its proximity to Burke Lakefront Airport. And that's an area where we think by careful design of specific habitat types, we can be careful of what sorts of attractions we're creating for, particularly migrating birds. The lakeshore is such an important zone for that activity, but we do want to be mindful of any potential safety concerns. We think that this is just a great opportunity to add and supplement crucial habitat along the lakefront.
Yeah, that's a great answer. And we'll be providing, more detail on kind of the habitat elements of the plan in the final plan that are informed by all of those resources that Jen mentioned. So I'm just going to read, I think, my last two questions, and then I think William has a good one to kind of end on, just being mindful of time. I want to share the polling responses and talk a little about next steps. So this question, sorry, what is First Energy's place for the former power plant site? I don't know if Freddie's still on the line. I believe that's more of like a future development question in terms of what might happen at that site.
Yes, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
So obviously First Energy still is a remaining development opportunity. There has been some interest posed in that particular site, but again, nothing definitive at this point. But we know that the land there at First Energy definitely needs to be leveraged. And that is something that we are still in the exploratory phases of dealing with at this point.
Great. And Freddie, kind of piggybacking on that question, and then I'll kick it back to William for the final one. Once the plan, this is from Ernesto, once the plan is implemented and economic development is stimulated, will new construction projects such as retail, residential, commercial, and other businesses be held to a sustainability standard when building within a certain radius of this project?
That's a heck of a comment there. Obviously, and I'm going to try to answer it the best I can. That's ultimately the objective, that as future development comes in, it's done in an environmentally sensitive way. And part of our job as the Planning Commission and the city is to ensure that we hold development interests to a certain standard. There are green building standards that exist for housing projects in the city of Cleveland. And we do have tools in place to ensure that that filter happens as development interests comes in the future.
Great, thanks. So William, I'll kick it back to you for the last question and then we'll wrap up.
Great. So I've got two questions I think are a great place to end on. So one is, could someone explain more information on what the upcoming workshop entails? And then in what other ways can people get involved? And is it possible to spread awareness via options such as TV outlets to get the word out?
Yeah, thank you for that question. And I do want to extend an invitation to everybody to join us for a workshop this weekend. We'll probably be repeating workshops a couple times through the summer, but the information is found on the clevelandmetroparks.com/cheers, and you can click the link to register for a workshop. We have them, I need my little cheat sheet here. We have several locations and several times over the weekend, just to try to be convenient to people's schedules to come out and just do a short hike. We're meeting Saturday at 3 at Cleveland Lakefront Nature Preserve or North Gordon, kind of near the boat ramps. Then Sunday we have 4 sessions, and then we added one Monday night too. But the format of the workshop is really pretty simple. People register, and then I send kind of a reminder email with more specific, instructions. Hey, we're going to meet at this part of the parking lot. Here's the weather forecast, and we just kind of meet in a small group. We all wear masks and are socially distanced, and just do a short walk around the park area and kind of share our observations of kind of what we like, what could be better. And I also have big boards of the Cheers plans that we'll be bringing along for discussion about that. And so at the end of the workshop, we compile some notes and use it to help continue to refine the plans. And, the workshops we had in September were super informative and provided a lot of the insight that's reflected in the current plan. I want to mention too, please encourage friends and neighbors to attend. We have some Dave's gift cards, and for every workshop session, we'll be doing a quick drawing, so you could get a $20 Dave's gift card. And it's just a great, chance to be outside and, really absorb what it's like at the lakefront. There are a lot of beautiful areas, but we're really confident that we can make it better. So that's my workshop.
We also have
spiel.
some fun water bottles, right?
Right. Water
Yeah.
bottles too. Yes.
Yes. So if you want a Cheers water bottle, make sure you show up to the workshop.
Yeah, and I want to
worth it.
say a special thank you to Charlie and Famikos. They're going to be co-hosting some of the workshops this weekend, and Joe and his team with St. Clair Superior are co-hosting. So again, it's a great way for us to kind of really try to meet with neighbors in adjoining communities, and but they're open to all people. So thank you.
Absolutely. All right, so I'm going to end by sharing the polling results. Hopefully everyone can see this. So for scale of 1 to 10 related to meeting the needs of the community, it seemed like most people felt that the plan meets that pretty well. And then, whoops, scrolled way too fast. In terms of meeting the needs of the environment, seems like, again, most people seem to think that it meets it pretty well. And then early action projects. Okay, so improved community connections was overwhelmingly the winner of the Zoom polling for early actions. So that is good to know. And these questions, if you have people that weren't able to attend the meeting tonight, we are going to have a survey. The meeting recording, presentation, and all of the materials will be up on the website. So please direct your friends and family if they would like to provide their input to take the quick survey, look through the materials. We'd love to hear from everyone. And I think with that, I will end the meeting. We really appreciate everyone's comments and your questions. We had some really thoughtful questions. And yes, Jen, happy Earth Day. This is a great day to be doing it. Thanks for the reminder. But we really appreciate everyone joining and the enthusiasm related to the project. Yeah, just on behalf of the partners, the stakeholders, the community members, everyone who's been involved, this has been a really great process, and we're excited to keep moving it forward and keep engaging with everyone in the community. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you everyone for coming.
Bye, y'all.
Yeah, thanks, everybody.